President Trump is back in the White House, and major policy changes are already shaking things up. From slashing medical research funding to withdrawing the U.S. from key global agreements, his administration is making significant moves that could reshape science, health, and climate policy. At the National Institutes of Health, leadership is shifting, and major universities are losing millions in research grants. The U.S. has once again pulled out of the World Health Organization, and Trump has signed an executive order to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time. What does this mean for the future, and how will it impact the American population? I have the privilege of speaking with bioengineer Maya Frazier as we break down the impact of these decisions. Welcome, everyone. I'm right here with Maya Frazier, a biomedical engineer who has graduated from Boston University, actually. And given the current political climate, we thought it was fit for us to have this conversation. So I'm going to start with the basics. What made you want to become a biomedical engineer?
I'm not going to lie. I saw a movie. So no one in my family, that's in my immediate family or my household, is into engineering. Like both of my parents, no. My sister, no. Brother, no. So I thought growing up, I either wanted to do like neuroscience or like be a doctor. That lasted like 10 seconds. But then I saw this movie called Big Hero 6. And so I saw this guy, Tadashi Hamada, who was not the main character, but like the most important character. And he was a family man. He was a doctor, but also an engineer. And he built like this healthcare robot. And at the time, I don't know how old I was exactly, but I was in middle school. So maybe like 12 or something. And I was like, oh, this is it. I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to build something, but be in the healthcare field because I felt like that's where people needed the most help. And even at such a young age, without knowing all of the statistics and the research to back that up, I just knew that there was a need. And I was like, this is what I want to do. But I didn't know what it was called yet at the time.
Yeah. And when did you realize what it was? When did you put like a term on what you wanted to become?
Pretty late in high school. Because at the time, even now when I was in college, everyone was saying like biomedical engineering is relatively new. And when I say new, I mean like less than 20 years. So it wasn't like biomedical engineering isn't even offered everywhere. So I had to do some like deep digging into like what are people who like make healthcare devices? Because when I would look up people who build, it would be mechanical engineering, and then it would pop up like cars or like refrigerators and HVACs. And I was like, not my ministry, not my portion. That's not what I want to do. But I eventually found the correct term in high school, I think.
In high school. And then can you think about a time where you felt really excited about working either on a project or something related to the biomedical field?
In college or before?
Whichever you want.
Okay.
We can do both.
Okay. So before, like in 2020, I was working at Emory, like right before the pandemic. Y'all, wear a mask. I got so sick working there. But I was working in and out of triage, and this is such a full circle moment. And I saw something called the pulse oximeter. And I didn't know what it was or how it worked at the time, but it kind of just like stayed in the back of my mind because I knew it was like this little thing you put on your finger and it pretty much measures your like blood oxygen saturation. So it's like how well you're breathing. And I was like, okay, that's nice, but how does that work? Like that does not make any sense. How does this little finger clamp let you know that I don't have asthma. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. But like at the time while I was at Emory, that wasn't my job, like researching stuff like that. That's not what I was doing. So fast forward to my senior year in college, that's exactly what I was doing. That's exactly what I was doing. I was researching pulse oximetry and the fact that it did not work for people with high melanin. And I was rebuilding it. That's exactly what I was doing.
And so you rebuild the pulsar?
The pulse oximeter, yes. With the team, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Like not, yeah. But yes, that's what we did for our senior design project.
And what can you tell me about it? What is something interesting or something that stood out to you while you were researching?
While I was researching, it really showed me how important DEI really is. And in hindsight, but because having things in the medical field that are used by all people, that's not optional. Like, that's not it. Especially because there's not a separate pulse oximeter for Black people or people who have more melanin or deeper skin tones. There's just not one. So why am I going into triage? Now, this is something that's used if you're getting a checkup, if you're in the ER, if you're having an allergic reaction. No matter the scope of your emergency or health issue, you're getting a pulse oximeter, even if it's just a regular checkup. So why is this not working then? Like, this is something that everyone has to use. So why doesn't it work? And it became a huge issue in the pandemic, because if this is something that's judging essentially how well you're breathing and making sure you don't have like asthma or sleep apnea or some kind of like breathing condition, it needs to work. So when the pandemic came, which, as you guys know, COVID is a respiratory issue. So if you had more melanin, long story short, it would absorb more light from the pulse oximeter and it would make you look like you were healthier than you actually were. But the way that the measurements work is by percentage. So any small like discrepancy was going to give you a whole nother percent. And like, for example, to be healthy, you need to be like 98% or above. But if you're at like 96%, you need to be admitted. Like, that's how small the margin of error is. So if you have more melanin and you're getting a higher reading, it makes you look like you're breathing fine. But during the pandemic, a lot of people who were of darker skin tones it appeared that they were healthier than they were, and they got pulled off of respirators too early, and there were a lot of fatalities. Like, are you kidding? This basic technology that is in every triage during a pandemic, a national, international crisis, and it's not working? Especially because healthcare providers already have this disclaimer when they get pulse oximeters. If you have on dark nail polish, it's not going to work right. So you didn't think that was going to translate to skin tone? Mind you, there's no correction factor. There was no, let's make an alternate one. Let's make like just anything, some algorithm to like fix it. It was just nothing. And then people started dying, and then that was it.
And has there been any advancement ever since?
There's been an attempt at advancement, but in light of recent events. So when I was working on this, it was 2024. I think the project ended in May 2024. And it was continued on by the company that we were working with, and we were working with the sleep apnea the sleep apnea research lab at Brigham and Women's Hospital on the Harvard Med. And so I can say them, there's a school. But so we were working with them on this project because obviously they could see the discrepancy as well and what was happening. But in light of recent events and things like DEI apparently not mattering anymore, which people don't see how DEI goes into healthcare and everything else, it's kind of a big question mark right now as far as like how that's looking for the future and like what's being done in healthcare with that.
Yeah, well, you literally did the segue for me.
Yeah.
We were definitely going to talk about that.
Okay.
We're talking about how DEI and a lot of other things lately have been basically put to a stop. And how can you take me back to the moment where you found out that there were no more funds, like funds were being frozen for the NIH, and ties were being severed with the World Health Organization.
Jaw dropped, but it shouldn't have. Like, I feel like we should have seen this coming. This has been a slow drip of doom for a long time. Like, we should have seen this coming.
Why do you think so?
Just everything that had been going on. And he said that this was going to happen. And I feel like...
And by he, you mean Trump.
Our current president, yeah, the current administration, which everyone, I wanted to believe that even though this is what he said he was going to do, I wanted to believe that logic and critical thinking would outweigh the status quo, but it didn't. And in my mind, I'm thinking, like, right now it's 2025. We are less than a decade off of a pandemic where millions of people died. Millions. And this isn't hearsay. We all lived through this. We all survived this. And I think about 95% of people who lived through it know someone that either got it or died from it. So this isn't hearsay. We were here. We lived through it. We had to leave school. We didn't get to graduate. Some people had to do their first year of college online. Some people couldn't go to the school that they wanted to go to because their parents were too scared to send them off. Like, this is not something that we just heard on the radio, saw on TV. Like, we were living the consequence of being in a pandemic. So I'm thinking, we're less than 10 years away. Actually, at the time, we were less than 5 years away from the tip top of that pandemic. So I'm thinking, there's no way that this is really happening. There's no way that literal research in healthcare is going to be put on pause. And people were so quick to want a vaccine for COVID when it was up and popping at the time. You don't realize that if he stops all this healthcare stuff, that vaccine research stops as well. All of these things. So I'm thinking, there's no way, right? Just off of logic alone, we all suffered and lived through that. And people were crying, screaming, throwing up about being in the house for a year and a half, 2 years. So I'm thinking, no, there's no way we forgot how that felt so quickly that we're just going to shut healthcare down. But he did. And so it did make my jaw hit the floor. But it shouldn't have. This is exactly what he said he was going to do. I guess I'd hoped. I don't know. I hoped. Yeah.
What were you hoping for?
That it just wouldn't happen. But you know what? I was dumb again. Because at the height, this might just be something I know just from proximity, because I was living in Atlanta at the time and the head of the CDC is there. But we were at the height of the pandemic and he said, no, we're defunding the CDC. I should have known right then that logic just was not what we were using to schedule our next moves as a country. And this was 2020, 2021. So Donald Trump was president at that time. This wasn't the Biden administration. So from then, I should have known that if we're at the height of the pandemic and people are dying as we speak, and it's to the point where I just can't believe we got memory loss so quickly. Did you not remember how in the pandemic, if someone was giving birth, no one could be in the room? If someone was dead or dying, their body had to be cremated, no funerals. You couldn't even see a body. Did we just forget this? If someone was in the ER or had a horrible accident, they just could not have visitors. They couldn't have family. They couldn't have anything. All the doctors that were working, they had to either live in hotels or get Airbnbs or something because they couldn't be with their families. And that's actually why I stopped working at Emory, because my last day of school, I'll never forget, was March 12th, 2020. And that's the day that they were like, okay, you need to go home. Don't come back here. Sorry, your internship's over. It's hey, by me. But my mentor, who was a doctor, her daughter, who's one of my really good friends, was in my graduating class in high school. And her daughter is telling me how she hadn't seen her mom. It had been weeks turned into months. And she's like, I'm about to go to college. I don't know the last time I've seen my mom. I don't know when I'm going to see my mom. She was like, I can't ask my mom to not work because she's a doctor and we need her. But what about me? I want my mom at home. I want my mom and I'm about to leave and go to college. Did we just forget that happened? Just for us to fast forward less than 10 years later, less than 5 years later, to just essentially shutting down science and healthcare as a whole. No way.
And how do you think this change is going to affect future crisis? If we have another pandemic, for example, or anything of that sort?
I don't know, because I guess in my lifetime, COVID, in terms of like a pandemic or something that really took over the world, COVID is the only frame of reference I have because that's the only one that I lived through. But at least then we had like world warnings. Like it sucked, but the pandemic kind of slowly crept up on us. And then, because it got to the US, at least reportedly, pretty late. But the rest of the world were very vocal and transparent about, okay, like this thing is coming. So at least we had some kind of, okay, like we know something, there's a possibility that something could touch us. Now we're out of the World Health Organization. We're out of everything. So if something, God forbid, were to attack us, what's it looking like? And even then, leaving all of these organizations, because COVID was sad and scary for everyone. Even if we could get foreign help, what is that looking like? And not even in the terms of like monetary help, like money. I mean, just like research. Because like when COVID happened, it was healthcare workers and scientists from all over the world banding together to try to crack this thing. So now that we're out of all of those organizations, what is it looking like? So of course it's the World Health Organization that we left. Before a time, the National Institute of Health was also ordered to cease research immediately. Well, what would we do if we did get hit with something else? No research? And it was to the point where they weren't even allowed to purchase materials. The National Institute of Health, the National Cancer Institute, essentially, unless your research was like completely privatized, which isn't most people, and even then they would run out of money eventually. It just wasn't happening. They couldn't even purchase materials. The CDC, like that day, they got an immediate cease letter to stop all research, stop all everything that day. So if something were to creep up on us or just slam into us all at once, what would we do? Because even when COVID did hit us and we did know to wear masks and we did know to go out, to not go outside, that still wasn't 100% effective because of course not everyone did it. But like, people were still dying in mass large numbers. And that was with vaccines coming out. That was with research. That was with help. So what will we do now? I'm just saying it's looking real scary.
And with that change, whoa, 1, 2, 3. and with the freeze of the funding, how did that affect you, for example, as someone that recently graduated from college and we're going to go in that field?
Yeah. Oh, man. It was not good. First of all, then, or even now, I guess, I was working at a nonprofit. So that was scary for them as well, because that also was put on freeze or like review, like going over nonprofit funding. So we were just like, well, and then when I found out about basically science in and of itself being put on hold, I have multiple friends who were all in like biomedical engineering or like adjacent to that. So maybe like biology or just like some kind of human physiology research. Sick, sad, and terrible. So like that whole week, offers were rescinded, interviews were canceled the day of. If you look at like a job portal, it would say, if you applied for the job, it would say like 404 page not found. It was not good. It was like watching every career aspiration that you've ever had crumble in front of your face. And unless you were going for like somewhere that was privatized, which some were on, I guess, hiring freezes because of what was going on. Everyone was kind of just really confused and it was really abrupt. But all of the places and like the interviewers and all of that, they were very apologetic about what was going on, which I appreciate. And my friends appreciate it as well. But like, that doesn't solve anything. But we also acknowledge like that's not their fault either. Like, what are you going to do? It's government regulation. Yeah.
And you just mentioned that it felt like all of your career aspirations just crumbled in front of you. Did that make you reconsider what field you would go into?
Not illogically, no. I probably should. I probably should have, because that is very scary, very up in the air, watching like the whole field that you want to go into be potentially put on pause, erased, stopped, anything. And especially if that is how you want to impact the world. But in my mind, I said I slaved over this degree. No way. Even if it was only vanity, that would be the reason why I refused to not be an engineer. That was gonna have to be it. But no, I wanted to stand 10 toes down because I like I said, I knew since I was like 12. And like I'm 22 now. That was 10 years of really knowing that I was locked in. And I know 10 years doesn't sound like a long time, but when you're 22, that's like half of my life. But like I knew that this is what I was going to do, how I wanted to impact the world, why. I worked at it, so I became good at it. And I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and passionate about it, you know? So I didn't want to give up on it. Even now, but I really feel like that is really what I want to do. But also this happening just goes to show that now it's just more necessary for people to be willing to do this, to put in the work and the research. And if anything else, yeah, the fact that we just got out of a pandemic like 5 years ago. Yeah.
And in your own words, you said, illogically, no, you didn't think about another career path.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know what exactly pushed you to keep that dream on?
Honestly, my first thought was literally God and God alone. Because there were so many times I should have changed my mind. I would be up late at night, crying, screaming, throwing up. Like, why am I even doing this? No one in my family does this. No one knows what this industry looks like. My professors are really like, sometimes they would really just be doing too much. Sometimes they wouldn't even offer the help that we needed. Sometimes they were faster to discourage us than to ask us what was wrong or encourage us or ask us what we needed. And sometimes it just felt like, yeah, why am I doing this? So there honestly isn't a logical reason as to why I stayed on course. Because even in talking to my parents, there was never like a doctor, lawyer, engineer, you know? Like, so if I called my mom multiple times, I was like, Mom, this is so hard. I don't know what I'm doing. This, at the third. She'd be like, oh, okay. Well, if you want to switch majors, you can. But my mom always with the jokes. She'd be like, I'd laugh at you, but but you can. Like, she was never pushing me to be anything that I didn't want. Like, she never did that. And she never told me what she wanted me to be or anything. So like that pressure from like family, that wasn't it. I don't know. I think I just really liked it. And I think I actually liked learning. Yeah. And I think on a personal side, I saw people suffering. Like I knew what lack of healthcare was doing. Like I saw it very close up. And I knew what lack of accessibility was doing. And I knew, like I just knew, like I just saw things. And I was like, there's no way that people are living like this with healthcare and science and technology advancing as fast as it is. There's no way that people are living the way that they're living. And I saw that. And I saw that a lot of it was just accessibility. And I was like, yeah, we can't have this.
And what did you see?
So I guess in learning, through living, you just see that like a lot of times like devices don't work or they can't be used by the people that need them. Like, why can they not use this? They either can't use it or people assume a lot about accessibility. Like people assume that people have money to buy this. They assume that people have Wi-Fi. They assume that people are 100% able-bodied. They assume that someone has someone at home to help them put it on, attach it, keep it clean. There's just so many assumptions. And so a lot of the times, the demographic that needs these devices they either don't work for them or they just can't access them for whatever reason. And it's just like, what is the point of that? Because not too much on the engineers now. I understand you take all this time, all this money, all these resources to make this thing that, yes, it does work generally, but work for who?
And to get a better picture, when you say, for example, something that doesn't work because you're assuming that they have the funds for it or assuming that they have someone to help them with it, do you have like an example, a clear example, so that people can have a clear idea of what that can look like?
Yeah. So a lot of things. Firstly, I guess one of the things I saw up close, prosthetics.
Mm.
Like, for example, if someone has like a prosthetic arm or two prosthetic arms, how are they going to put it on? Let's be honest. Like, just certain things that people just don't think about. They're like, okay, you have a prosthetic arm and it works. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure it works. But how are they going to put it on if they have like, just certain things? And I think it's just hard to kind of look outside yourself and make devices that you don't need. Mm. Which, fair, like I said, not too much on the engineers, but like that is the majority of engineering. You are making medical devices that aren't for you. Mm. Like, this is for someone who's really going through something that, while you try to empathize, you'll never understand. If you're an engineer sitting here on AutoCAD, making and designing this prosthetic, you have no idea what it's like to have a prosthetic. So of course you probably are able-bodied and have two functioning arms and legs and things like that, but this person doesn't. So when you think about things like that, you need to think about the fact that, okay, if this person has a prosthetic arm and it could possibly be their dominant arm, how are they going to put it on? What if they don't have someone to help them at home put it on? What if they're old and live by themselves? What if anything? Or if you have like a silicone or latex covering on it, what if they're allergic? Is it hypoallergenic? What if they still want to live an active lifestyle? What if they can't get it wet? Like, what's going to stop it from rusting? How do they clean it? If they're taking it off and they only have one arm, how are they going to clean it? Like, just things like that. And even when it comes down to cost, oh, it's ridiculous. Because when it comes to things like insulin pumps, first of all, when you're paying money for things like that, you're not actually paying for like the insulin or like with EpiPens, the epinephrine itself, or like the glycogen or glycagon that you're like injecting in yourself. Most of the time, you're paying for the device. So it's the device that's the insanely expensive thing, which doesn't even make sense. Because at this point, medical devices are monopolized, so they can be as expensive as they want to be. Even though it's dirt cheap to actually make them, they charge like 1,000% more. And that's not me exaggerating at all. So if glycogen or glucagon, which is like the human digestible form, I guess, of like sugar, like for people who have diabetes, if like 2 grams of that is like $20, who is paying hundreds and thousands of dollars for insulin pumps? Where are we getting these figures from? And it is greed. It's the same thing with like EpiPens. An EpiPen can last you 1, maybe 2 injections. And the epinephrine or norepinephrine, which is the thing that's like giving you the adrenaline, so like you don't die if you have an allergic reaction, that's dirt cheap. So the actual pen itself, and mind you, those things expire. So if you don't have an allergic reaction, good for you, but it's probably expired and you need to buy another one. Why is it hundreds of dollars? Why is it hundreds of dollars? Who is paying that? Mind you, if you have an EpiPen, you probably have a fatal allergy. Mm-hmm. Like one of my friends is allergic to peanuts. Mm. She has an EpiPen, but it's expired. And she was like, okay, like who's paying so and so hundreds of dollars just for this? She's like, I just hope I'm careful, I guess. Especially because like we were in college, like we just graduated, we're in school. Who has hundreds of dollars to spend on an EpiPen in college? Or if you're old and on Social Security, your allergies don't just go away. So who is spending hundreds of dollars? Who has hundreds of dollars to spend on anything like this? And it hurts so much more when you know that it's not worth hundreds of dollars. Like no one should be charging this much for anything. So it's either you buy it or you chance death.
which also lately the House of GOP did pass a bill that will potentially make it harder for people to have access to healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, and all of the government programs that are helping the people that are in need for it. And we're talking about the political climate in regards to the biomedical engineering field, but also science in general for researchers. And what would you say to younger people that were aspiring to be in the field and that are still in school, either thinking about going to school for it or are in school for it and might feel discouraged?
I don't blame anyone for being discouraged, but if this is something that you want to get into, I feel like you just got to stay 10 toes down. And it is sad because you're looking around at the world and this is devastating, especially for people who do know someone with diabetes or someone who's just elderly, someone who has high blood pressure, someone who needs an insulin pump, someone who has a prosthetic, someone who uses a wheelchair, just anything like that. It's hard looking around and knowing that due to things that have passed, like laws and bills and things that have passed, there's a chance that this person can never get what they need again. But keep that in your mind. Let that fuel you. Don't let it discourage you. I feel like when things like this happen, it just shows that people are needed more and more with the passion. Like, I know no one wants to be sad, but put your heart in it. Like, let your heart be in it. And don't forget how you feel. Don't be desensitized to watching people suffer. This is why people need you. Because a lot of people who are in those situations, they can't stand up for themselves. They don't know what devices exist to help them. They don't know how to get them, or it's just very, very hard. And just keep that in mind and just keep working because the world needs you. People need you. And not only are you needed, if this is your passion, don't give up. Don't give up. Having other people as your passion, it'll take you far, but it's also needed. Like, you'll feel fulfilled. Yeah, you just got to get there. But if you can get through engineering school, you can get through it. It'll be okay. It is sad, but it's okay to be sad about it. Like, it's a sad situation. Yeah.
If you could sit down, have sit down with policymakers or Trump himself, like we're sitting down having a conversation. This is Trump, not me, but this is Trump. This is you. What would you say?
What would I say? I think it would be a very informative conversation. I would ask a lot of questions because I feel like I don't think I know that people who are making these policies and people who are passing these policies, they're not healthcare researchers. They don't have medical degrees and they don't see what this is doing to people. So I feel like, yes, we know, like, inherently in being a politician, it is about money and it's about funding and it's about spending. But anything that's being spent on the well-being of the people, that's not a waste. That's not something that you can cut out. So I feel like I would ask a lot of questions because I feel like there's a disconnect. I would probably ask, like, what do you think is happening? Like, what do you think Medicare and Medicaid do? What do you think the research and science world is doing right now? Because whatever he's thinking, it can't be equivalent to what's actually happening. Like, I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding. Whether or not it's willful or intentional ignorance, that's on him and that's on them. I don't know if they're uncurious. I don't know if they just don't care. But either way, words will be had. And I feel like if someone is willfully ignorant, uncurious, or they don't care, like genuinely don't care, there's not much you can do, to be honest. You can't teach someone how to have empathy, and you can't teach someone to care about other people. Like, that's just not, But if it is something that is factual, or I guess facts-based, evidence-based, or experience-based, I feel like a conversation would help if that is the issue. Like, explain why cutting money in healthcare is just not a good idea, and explain why DEI in healthcare and in other branches is important and it is necessary, and how all these things do actually help like the American people. So many things just tie into it because it's like America is the center for like diabetes and cardiovascular issues. We can't be a country that is number one in cardiovascular issues, diabetes, and high blood pressure, and then you cutting money to healthcare. Like, do we see the disconnect here? Right. Like just certain things like that, it doesn't make sense. But also, I know I talked a lot about healthcare with like people who have certain conditions, like whether it's cardiovascular, respiratory, cancer, diabetes, whatever, but also just like basic healthcare, like people who have babies. How are you gonna take care of the baby? And women that are pregnant, and I didn't realize until my sister was pregnant 5 years ago in the midst of the pandemic. Those doctor's appointments are frequent for both her and Bean after like the newborn stage, you know?
Bean is
my nephew.
To clarify.
Yeah. But like in the newborn stage, like those doctor's appointments are very frequent. And Bean also has like a health condition. It's called EOE. Essentially, he has like a lot of trouble like swallowing. Like his esophagus, like it's rough down there. Mind you, he's only 5 right now. So you can imagine the doctor's appointments, the procedures, the medication that he has to take, all of this at 5. So imagine like this is what's happening to him at 5. But if science and medical research were to be cut off, what would he do? Like just for the rest of his life growing up? What now?
Do you think there's anything currently that researchers and people in the field can do to help the situation?
I think if people don't want to listen, they don't want to listen. I have seen people that are in like these science and technology and research spaces, they do advocate for themselves, but if they don't want to hear you, they're not going to hear you. Like I said, it's a matter of wanting to listen, whether or not you're willfully ignorant, uncurious, or you just don't care. Money is money. Cut it. Like it just depends. And I don't know where their headspace is. I don't know if they're ignorant because they literally just don't know. And like I said, the people who are making and passing these policies, they're not healthcare professionals. They're not scientists. They're not researchers. Mind you, healthcare is not a political issue at all. Like this is not something that should be up for grabs. If someone is sick, they're sick and they need help. That has nothing to do with the Republican, Democratic, anything. But they're treating it like it is. And they're treating science and human well-being as if it's just up for grabs by some political party. And I feel like that's where we completely lost the plot. Like this isn't something that should be a house or a bipartisan issue.
If I gave you unlimited funding today, I don't know, I became a billionaire.
Okay.
Aisha has so much money. She doesn't know what to do. Oh, philanthropy. Maya, here, unlimited money.
Okay.
What would you do with it?
What would I do with it?
In terms of research, what is something that a project? Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna buy a house, a car. I know that.
Okay. In terms of research, I feel like I would dial back a lot on what's currently happening. So, like for example, we don't need flying cars or joy trips to space. Is what I think. I feel like researching, a lot has already been done. So like, for example, like I said earlier, America is like a hotspot for cardiovascular and like high blood pressure and stuff, right? But if we know that, then we should be researching why that is the case. And sometimes it's literally as simple as going back to food or like what's being grown, what's in the food, what is the FDA saying, doing? What are they allowing to happen? So I feel like if it's issues with things like that can be prevented literally just from like what you eat, I feel like that would be a large chunk of research. Yeah.
With the current political climate in regards to science and technology, where do you see the industry go from now on?
Well, so I feel like in just knowing what has happened in the past, we just can't continue going in the way that we're going. It's just unsustainable. But I also feel like we know we're on a sinking ship. Like we know it's really the Titanic, multiple holes in the ship. We hit 10, 11 icebergs at this point. But at this point, all we've done is live on a sinking ship. So when you've lived all of life on a sinking ship, you can't conceptualize another way to live. So like the boat is sinking, but where else are you gonna go? What else are you gonna do? There's not even another way of life that we're familiar with. Like we've been in turmoil with healthcare and science for so long because we tried to make everything a political issue that it's just a mess. Like it's really just a mess, but it can't keep going like this because when you're in the midst of healthcare crises like we are now, and you just pull the science rug from under the country, there's no way that this could end well. So it's just not going to keep going like this because it can't. Not because I think that there will be a change of heart or because I think they'll finally come to their senses, but like they just can't. And at the end of the day, even if we want to make it a financial issue, at the very end of the day, no matter how rich and privileged the rich and privileged are, money's not going to buy you a cure that doesn't exist. So it just can't go on like this.
And you said that people are used to being in this sinking ship. So what else is there to do? Do you think there's something that regular people like me, should do or can do to help the situation, politically or not?
Yes, I feel like like we said, right, or like I said, healthcare and science should not be a bipartisan issue. But the fact of the matter is that it is. And when you see these policies that people have, it is your responsibility to go and vote. And I don't mean wait for the presidential election, because let's face facts. If you're waiting for the presidential election to vote, it's too late. You need to see what your local government is doing. Local government and state officials, you need to know what they're doing, the tickets that they're running on, the policies that they want. You need to be voting for them, because that's how we get to the presidential elections. That's what you need to be voting for. So politically, that. Also, keep yourself educated on what's going on. I know sometimes the internet and social media can create like an overwhelming influx of information. Sometimes it feels like a vacuum, like you could never know enough. But be very intentional about what you're researching, what you're learning. So like when you do see these issues pop up, okay, so like for example, now we're out of the World Health Organization. But did y'all know what the World Health Organization did in the first place? Right. So, and you see funding being pulled away from like the CDC and like the NIH and like the NCI. And it's like, did you know what they did in the first place? And also just looking back in the past, these institutions were so reputable for a reason. Do you know how many times that like the National Institute of Health or like the National Cancer Institution or the CDC, you know how many times it was literally their research alone that helped this country move on from like polio, measles, mumps, smallpox, chickenpox? Like there's a reason that certain things aren't around anymore. So when you look at in the past and you see why we don't have to worry about certain things, it should alarm you as to, well, how come we're pulling funding from now? Like what's going on now? So like just knowing why this is important and why people are in uproar. At this point, none of us can afford to be uncurious or ignorant about anything. We really just cannot. So I feel like voting, doing research, even though it gets tiring, never stop advocating for yourself and your needs, because I promise you, whatever you're struggling with, whether it's local, state, federal, national, whatever, there's a government sector that is supposed to serve whatever issue that you're having, because that's their whole job. Like, up to the president of the United States, your entire job, you're like the ultimate public servant. That's your job. You serve us, not really the other way around. So don't ever stop advocating for yourself. But yeah, you can't sleep through, I don't want to say the end of the world, but like, you can't think that if you just kind of keep your head down and live under a rock, that these issues aren't going to touch you. That's never the case. That's never the case.
Do you have any last comment to add?
Last comments. Okay. Last comments. Always fight for what you believe in. If you're scared, do it scared. Don't let current circumstances shake you away from your passions. Like I said, I know it's scary, do it scared. There's a reason that you're interested in something. There's a reason you're passionate about something. There's a reason that you've been wanting to do whatever you wanted to do for years. Don't let what's currently happening make you shift or shake you. You know what your purpose is. You have to stand in it, know it, believe it, and also walk in it. Move like, even though a lot of things are up in the air, move as if you know what you're supposed to be doing. Even if you're just faking it till you make it. Like, don't forget how hard you have to work to get where you are. It wasn't for nothing. If you feel like you're called to help or serve people, you can't just be called to help or serve people who mirror your lifestyle. Because like, at that point, you kind of lost the plot. And even then, I can speak to like my own privilege in that realm. Because like, for me, like we just said at the beginning, I went to Boston University. So I was surrounded by people who went to Boston University. That's a privilege in and of itself. The way that I grew up in a very suburban area. So that's a privilege in and of itself. So a lot of the times, the people that it's necessary to fight for, they might not be within arm's reach of you. You might not even see them, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And you can't just keep putting your head down and pretending that like watching people suffer in this way is normal or just like a part of life, because that's how people get desensitized. And that's not what we do here. So I guess just keep hope alive and keep your head up. Yeah.
And I think those are the perfect words to end this on. Keep your head up. Mm-hmm. I hope everyone learned something throughout this exchange. And I certainly did. And thank you so much, Maya, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And everyone, remember to stay safe and be curious.